Hello everyone, welcome back to Netcode-Hub channel. I am Frederick and I'm very glad to meet you today. In this video, we are going to talk about how to render components dynamically in Blazor. It could be Blazor Server, it could be Blazor WebAssembly. Before we jump into this topic, make sure you have subscribed to this channel and also hit on that notification bell so you never miss out any of our upcoming content. Also, if you are okay or if you enjoy what you're going to see today, please do not forget to give this video a thumbs up. When you do that, it actually helps this channel grow. Stick around until the end of this video because trust me, you wouldn't want to miss this. I offer training session or coaching session to those who are interested in Blazor for the beginners. I'm talking about this .NET technologies comprised of Blazor, Blazor Server, and WebAssembly. We also have .NET MARI, we have .NET MARI Blazor Hybrid, and we have .NET Web API. So if you're interested in having a training session, one-on-one, you can just hit me up. You can do that through a mail specified in the video description. After having this lesson, I'll put this at the GitHub, so check the description as well. You have the link to clone this work. The core objective of this video is to help you know how to render or use components dynamically in Blazor WebAssembly or Blazor Server application. But the question is, what actually is dynamic component? Dynamic components allow us to create and render components at runtime. So when the app is running, you can create this component at that time. Now the next question here is it useful? Yes, it is. Let's take this scenario as an example. Let's say you have a form that you are filling. You have 3 text boxes that need to provide values for each box. The data that you have here, you need to add an extra 1 box. So maybe you have add new box or add extra 1. When you fill the first 3 text boxes, you need an extra text box to add it to the form. In such case, what can you do? You need a text box to be added onto the 3 boxes that you have. And this text box can be rendered dynamically. And that is what we're going to talk about. It is not actually only text box. You can use all forms of components that you have. That's an HTML element. You have text boxes. You have radio buttons. You have switch, and etc. You can use any of them. Let's have a look with an example for you to see. So within this, we can just add in an event. So we can retrieve the value that we're going to pass through the chart component into the parent component, and I'll add it to a list. Let's have a look and maybe you love it. There are so many ways of doing this. And I think what I'm going to show you here, it is the simplest of all. Let's see if it is so. Well, I have the project created and the name of this project is Blazor Dynamic Components. So as you can see from here, and this project will be available at GitHub, so you can just go in there and now check the video description for it. Let's go to pages. Now you see we have these are the default components that are there as soon as we create a new Blazor project. Now let's see, we have this fetch data. And on this fetch data, we're going to make this as a dynamic component. So in order to do that, the first thing to do here is we want to clear the route. Okay, so the route is no more. Now what we're going to do next here is we're going to call this component in the parent component. Okay, so let's put it to this index. And here we can just clear everything, or we can just maintain the one that we have here. Now the very first thing that we're going to do here is we can just add this a couple of times because it's a dynamic component and this component can be rendered multiple times. So let's see, in order to do that, we have to get a method to handle that. So let's have a button here. So let's say this is add forecast. Okay, so we're going to add forecast multiple times. So in here we have to have an event wired up, and now we can say that handle forecast. All right, so you have this method. Now to do that, we have to write the definition for this method. So at code, you know how to do that, isn't it? Let's put it there. Then we have a private void. You're gonna have this method since it returns nothing. Okay, now the next thing to do here is, since we're going to render this in the hierarchy form, we have to actually create a list so we can loop through whilst we render this forecast component. So in here, let's have a list. And now let's say this is component ID. So component IDs. But before we do that, here must be, let's make it as strings. Okay, so let's do it well. So list of strings. Then we have it as component IDs. Okay, so component IDs, I like to do that. And we set it to new list. Okay, so once we have this component ID, this is what we're going to do. We can just have ID equal to 1. Then let's add this component ID. Let's add it to the list that we have. So dot add, then add this ID. So anytime that we call this component, we assign an ID to it. This is a list, a string data type. You know that this is an integer, so in order to do that, we have to convert. That is why we're using this toString to a string. And when we are done, we can increase it by ID++. So this is a mechanism to maintain the state, right? To give each of the component an ID. Now with this, we can actually assign an ID to this as this ID that has been assigned over here. All right. So this is what we are doing. After doing this, the next thing to do here is to loop through this component list. As soon as I click on this button, it's going to increase this by 1. So if I click on 5 times, this is going to increase by 5 times. I'm going to have 5 strings in this list, right? Now these 5 strings, I want to loop them here. So if I loop them, I'm going to have 5. But instead of looping through and now displaying just an ID, we want to display the component. So any click is going to bring out the component. I hope you're getting the idea. Good job. Now let's see. So down here, where we have this button, down here, we can actually have this horizontal line to just separate it. Now the next thing that we're going to do here is let's loop through. So for each, then we're going to say component ID. So let's use a string ID in component ID. So I can just copy this. Very simple. Now this is just string. Let's paste this here. Then in our body tag, this is what we're going to do. We're going to call this forecast. And that's the fetch data, isn't it? So we call fetch data. So that's this component. Now we close it up. Let's go to this fetch data and now let's assign an ID to this. So let's say we have this table, and this table we want to assign an ID to this table. So in here, let's specify an ID. Then we come down here and I'll specify a parameter here as an ID. So we're going to provide this ID as a parameter to this anytime that we call this component. So this is going to make each component a unique ID number. So we're going to have a prop tab key, we have an int, and now this is an ID. Okay, so anytime that we use this component, we need to provide this ID. I hope you are with me. Now let's go back to the index. So in here, we have to provide this ID. Now with this ID, let's use this ID. So we are providing this ID here. This is a string ID. But since this is an integer, maybe we can use int pass, or we can change even this to string. So even this, we can change this as string. Okay, so that's an ID. And now when I come to the index, everything is working well. All right. When we run this, what we're going to have, let's see. So let's try to click on this. Now let's wait for this to render. So anytime that I click on that button, it's going to render that component dynamically. The number of times, the number of clicks is going to repeat itself. The number of, based on the number of clicks, we're going to have the same number of components. Let's wait and have a look what I'm saying. All right, so you have it set over here because you have this beautiful add weather forecast. You have our horizontal line over here, Now if I click on add forecast, see what happened. Instead of going to this has no data here because there's no link. If I click on this, what happened? Because I have this weather forecast being rendered over here. I know you know this already, isn't it? But let's see. Let's try it one more time. If I click on this, you can see we still have another one. So the number of times that I click, I'm going to have the same thing because we have 3. So we are rendering the same component multiple times. Yeah, so you can see. Now let's go through. Whoa. So you have everything set, and this is how you can use to render a component dynamically in runtime. Now let's say it is not only this. Maybe you're filling a form. The form is loaded. And then maybe you have a button that you want to add an input text box to it. And now with that input text box, as soon as I click on add extra text box, I have to get that text box, and the data that I have are passed into the text box. I have to be able to retrieve that. It sounds weird, isn't it? Let's read an example. It's going to make it clear for you to understand. So let's close this. And as you can see from here, we are supplying a parameter, a value from the parent to the child, isn't it? We're going to use an event callback to also return a value from the child to the parent. Now let's see. So once we have this, we don't want to use this. Let's go to the Solution Explorer. We have this fetch data. That is what we rendered. Let's use this counter. So I want to change this counter to text box. So this text box. Now this text box, let's clear everything from this side. So I'm going to clear all. Alright, now in here we need to specify our text box and also our parameters and etc. events. So let's do that. Now there's going to be an input. I know we're going to have a class. Now this class is going to be form control. I think so. It's a bootstrap class, form control. And let's have this bind. So this bind is going to be, let's say, name. Okay. Now with this name, is it name? Do you want name? Let's use this. Let's change this and now use unchange. And let's have this handle name. Or handle, let's say, extra name. It's not name extra. So handle extra. Because here you want to add name to it, an extra name. And inside this, what again can we do? Let's have a placeholder. Then we can say enter other name. And now we can close this peacefully. Okay, so that's an input. Now, when you come down here, we're going to have our code section. And now in our code section, first of all, let's have this method handled. And that's going to be, let's use private async task. And that is, we can just copy this method straightforward. And with this, it needs some parameter, and that is change event ask. Let's pass in E. Then in here, let's have our ID. So this is string, and maybe we can have an ID here. Let's make this as parameter. So we're going to provide this, okay? Now in our button here, we also need to specify the event callback. And here it is an event callback. Now this callback, we need to specify string. That's an other name because in the form of string. And we can just copy this. And in here, we can say handle extra name event. Okay. Now here, we're going to say that if string dot is null or empty, and we can have access to value, then this, we need to convert this to toString. So if this is null, then return. Very simple. Okay, if not, then we want to invoke this method. The return type here, it is string. So copy this dot invoke async. And now let's pass in the return type. And here, the return type is e.value. .toString. So in normal case, you can just store this, can just cache this, and now use it here. since this is an invoke async, we have to include an await. Okay, so we have this set and done. Now the ID that we specified, let's copy this, and now let's assign an ID to this text box. So we're gonna say ID is equal to, let's assign to this. Okay, so we are done here. Let's go to the index, and now this is the first one. Now this down here, this is what you're going to do. Let's have our HR horizontal line. Then in here, maybe we can create another list. So let's have at code section. Then let's have our list. Let's say this is text box ID and it's in the form of strings. And give it a name as text box IDs. So equal to new. Then let's have a button. Okay, so within the button, I'm going to have this div class as maybe row. Then I'm going to have this div class as column MD6. And let's have our div class. And I can just use a card class here. Let's specify the card title. And now here, this is card header. Let's use header instead. Now inside the header, let's have button. Maybe we're going to have at on click. Then we can say that add extra field. Okay, and that's going to be for the other name. Now then add extra field. We can have a class here as btn primary. And in the button, we can have add extra text box. Okay, so we have this as a button. When it is clicked, we're going to call this. So we're going to call this here, and inside this code, let's put it down here. So private void, and that is this. Okay, so when this is called, you want to have an int ID, the same thing, equal to 1. Then this text box ID. So dot IDs, and okay, so you need to add the ID, that's right. And as you know, dot toString supposed to be called here. After that, ID plus plus, and that's all. Okay, now we need to render this. So in order to do that, let's loop through this. This is column MD6. So we're going to display the text here. Now let's have another column on top here. And this is, okay, I want us to put it down. So we have the closing. Let's have another div. Then class. And now this is going to be column MD4. Let's close this. So let's make this as 4. And in here, let's have at for each. Then you're going to have string ID in text box IDs. So in this, I hope you're getting that. So we're going to loop through it. So in the terms of looping through that, we're going to call this text box component. So we can render this all the time. Now, it seems it is not popping up yet. That is this one. So text box. Then inside this, we can specify the ID here as this ID. Aside from that, there's an event called handle event. Did we make as an event callback? Let's see. No, we did not. So let's turn this as a parameter. Now you can have access to this method in here. So within this index here, we're going to have this event, and we can just copy the same event and repeat itself. And now this event is returning a string. Okay, so let's copy this. And now down here, let's have our private. We can have void since it returns nothing. But here, since it returns a string, no, it accepts a string as a payload, we're going to have here as extra name. Then what I'm going to do, we can just create a list of strings here. Okay, so a list of strings here, and maybe we can say that, not string, it's supposed to be string, isn't it? So names, so equal to new. Now once you have this, what this we're going to do, we're going to say names dot add then extra name. And now once you have this, we are going to loop through this. So in here, where we have this extra box, this card header, and under this, we're going to have the same div class. Then we're going to say card body. This is just a bootstrap class that I'm using. Now within this card body, we are going to loop through that. So in order to do that, I want us to use this OL to list them, OL, and that's an ordered list. And we're going to have a class of list group. So list dash group, we have it set. Let's open it. Now here we have to loop through the list of string that we have, and we're going to say string name in names, right? Is it names? Yes, of names. Then we're going to have li. So maybe you can have a class of list group item. So list group item, it is down here. Then in the middle, let's pass in name. Okay, that is all that we need to do, and we're able to going to render this dynamically. So let's save this, and now I'm going to save everything. Let's run this application. Alright, so we have it set on the screen. As you can see, the UI, it is there. Not actually all that nice, but let's maintain for this particular purpose, okay? Now I click on weather forecast. You tell me, I know this already. That's right. Let's go to the next one. I want to add an extra text box. Okay, so I click on that, and because I have the text box here, let's pass in the name. So let's say this is Netcode-Hub. So this is Netcode, and as soon as I check, maybe you can see the Netcode-Hub has been added here. I can click on this another text box, and we see another text box has been rendered over here, and I can type in the hub. You can just hit on the enter, and we have it set. I can also click on the next one. You have the next text box, and maybe to mention your name, you can just pass it over there, and I can just click on maybe the next one. You can see that has been added, and the next has been generated. So it is useful when you want to actually set a question. So you have to add a text box, pass in your question, add a text box for your answers. It could be A, B, C, D, or E. All the options, you can add various text boxes, and I'm assigning them. And I've shown you how to handle those events, handle those input from the text box, from the chat component, and how to add them to a list. You can put this in a database, and off you go. I believe this is very simple and clear. There are so many ways of rendering dynamic components. This is just a simple way. If you like it, you can just use this. I'll put the source code at the GitHub. So go in there and I'll check it out, and I'll try to review. You can even add more to this. Thank you so much. If you like what I'm doing and want to buy me some surprises, then coffee will be okay. Check the description. I have the link over there. You can do so, and I'll be happy to receive it. Hot one. That's right. Okay, so thank you, and make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. And as I said earlier on, that's the last thing. I do this coaching course for beginners in Blazor and .NET technologies. If you're interested, just hook me up. Check the description. The mail is there. Write something in there for me. Thank you, and I'm going to catch you up in the next video.